Okay, we're ready to pick it up again now with our step 9 in our little list, and that is we want to review the function coding. Every one of these transactions down here in net assets need to have a function. Now, it's a little bit of a challenge exactly how you're going to do it, but let's just check. They need to have a function. They need to have the right function. And so we could start with the beginning balance if you wanted to check that, but you might have just assumed that it is right. Perhaps it's been audited already, so you're mostly interested to the revenue and expense of this year have the right function. And this is the way that I would do it. I would drill down by function first. Okay? And let's see if this works. Okay, when we've got the function, where's function when you need it? There we go. And we have the function of each of these. Okay, now not all functions are created equally. That is, we have these transactions here that are I call departmental. And it would be a shame if there's a mistake and, youth ministry gets charged for a communication bill and so forth. But that is not so much of a problem. The first thing I would double check is that there's no row. It appears right here at the top that is a number up here, but it has white there and white there. That would mean a transaction did not have a function. Right away, you'd want to drill down on that transaction and find out why doesn't it have a function? How did it slip past the rules that are supposed to prevent this? And so that's very alarming that a transaction did not have a function. Also, you want to make sure that no transaction has had a star, an asterisk put beside it, where it says asterisk, and then a number. Maybe it says asterisk and not analyzed. That is no good either. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, depending on the dimension. But in the function dimensions, it would be a mess. So we don't want to discover that the accountants have created a code for asterisks. And the reason that is that they could easily do that because they don't know what function to put something to, so they say, oh, well, who has a star? Sun Plus people forgot to put a star over here. Well, no, they're not the same concepts. And so if you see a blank row up here or you see a star, you've got a problem, and you need to get rid of, get those transactions, drill down on those transactions and get them a function code put in using account allocations. Will allow you to change the function. Okay, so what you want to do is drill down on these, okay, and look at something like journal number, line number, transaction reference, description, and see what has been put in there, if they make sense with the function that they've been coded to. So if you just get any of these that are non-departmental and drill down on those dimensions, donation from Dr. Jones. Oh yeah, I remember he made a donation to this allocated function, you see. And so that is the whole idea, is that there's not that many transactions going to AFOs and to these UFINI things, UFs, that you can't drill down and make sure that they are right. Okay, the property ones for sure. All right, and so that is step 9, review the function coding. Okay, then we'll come back over here, and I'm going to remove my dependent sheets to keep our presentation tidy. So we're back to this trial balance here. Okay, the next step is to review the restriction coding. Well, restriction coding is a little bit of it's not such an important thing, but it's important for restriction coding to be done correctly. But if you drill down, let's just illustrate this. Let's drill down on this by function. And so I know I just did that a second ago, but I deleted it, so it'll only take me a second. And we're going to drill down on my revenue and expense by function. Okay. And then if I drill down on my AFOs by restriction, okay, I should be able to see if the restriction classification is making sense. So let's just do that. So this is all of my AFOs and the restriction. So I think I will do that again. Probably won't even bother erasing it. So here are my AFOs, the revenue and expense. And so I will drill down on that by restriction, and I'm going to show the restriction code and the name of the restriction. Okay, I don't have all my restriction codes memorized here. It's not that many, but there you go. So this is tithe operating, okay, and non-tithe, unrestricted allocated operating. So you can get a sense that here is what has been put into that one, whether that makes sense. Okay, so here we have AFO, General Conference Session Fund, having a restricted of unrestricted allocated functions. Yeah, that committee voted that. Okay, and this one is the AFO exchange fluctuation. Okay, unallocated is allocated, but it's unrestricted money. That's right. You see, and you get a sense. And here we have the ministerial scholarship getting some tithe. That was what the committee decided to do, and put some non-tithe money in there, so it makes you feel good. So you check, one way to check the restriction is just sort of drilling down on all your revenue expense and making sure that the combination of function and restriction makes sense. Another important thing to do, let's drill down on my revenue and expense by account code and description. Okay, and I have donated income. All right, donated income is easy to get the restriction incorrect on, and so I'll drill down on that, and I'm going to specify that I want to see the restriction and for my donated income. And here I have some that were unrestricted allocated and unrestricted unallocated. All right, and then I say, well, I know I have some donated income that was from a specific donor. It's supposed to go a specific way. You could drill down on the transactions, okay, and see what transaction was not properly restricted. Okay, so we could fiddle with that and go transaction date, journal number, transaction reference, description. You say, okay, here is a donation from Mr. Jones. It has been classified as unrestricted, and we know that it was temporary restricted, so we need to go and change that restriction classification over in the account allocations. Another way to go about doing that, let's see if I can find that. I've got a lot going on here. My donation income is I could just simply drill down on my donation income by transaction date, journal number, transaction reference, description, and restriction to make sure that it has been properly coded. Okay. Now, there's always a lot of questions why we even bother with restrictions. And even though this illustration doesn't really illustrate our database, our nice and clean, tidy database doesn't have a lot of temporary restricted donations coming in. But the purpose of this is that we want to be able to run a statement by restrictions for Mr. Jones so we can show the way his donation went and that we fulfilled his restricted donation. So it looks like a lot of hard work, but a major part of what we're doing in nonprofit accounting is being good stewards over the restrictions that are on the different pots of money. And so if the donors have restricted it, we want to spend it the way it's supposed to be spent, and we also want to be able to prove that we've done so. Okay, and so we spend a second checking on the restriction. Okay, that's step 10. Step 11 is to review the flag. Okay, in our trial balance, okay, we have let me get rid of all of these accounts so I don't get confused. I'm going to remove my dependent sheet. All right, we have the flag is an important role in two places. First off, it is important in our liabilities. Okay. And so let me drill down on these liabilities by account code and description. Okay. Now every one of these transactions and these accounts are supposed to have a flag. Each of these right here. Okay. Now the easiest way to do this is, it looks like it's the hard way, but it's really the easiest way, is to take that account and drill down by transaction detail. Okay. Transaction date, journal number, transaction reference, description. Okay. And I'm going to put debit and credit marker in there so the point is clear. And then I'm going to put in flag. Okay, so we've got credits are in and debits are out. That is the standard wisdom of the flag. That standard wisdom of flag is not correct though. Almost always credits are in and debits are out. Almost always. And until you run into the exception, that rule will do good. Debits are out and credits are in, except for an error correction. Okay? And a correction of a in is always an in, even if it's a debit, and a correction of an out is always an out, even if it's a credit. Okay? So if I have received money from one of my organizations, I've got a credit and I've flagged it as an in. If I have to fix one of these entries, it will be an in. And when I pay out money with a debit, it's an out. But if I've got to fix this entry because I made a mistake with the amount or something, then it is still an out, even though I'm crediting it to fix the problem. Okay? So it is any correcting entry keeps the same flag. Okay? So don't strictly follow credits are in and debits are out. Credits are in, ends are usually credits, but if an in is being corrected with a debit, is still an in. Okay? Alright, now so we're reviewing down here and you see I've got a debit, this an in. Okay, so you can see that these three entries right here have the wrong flag, or if these are genuinely credits and these are debits, which it looks like that's what's happening here. These debits are correct. Their flag has been marked wrong. Okay, and so that's the point of comparing the credits to the debits, and since this is not error corrections, we're not in the exception case. Debits are out, credits are in, and so I have to fix those flags over an account allocation. Okay, the other places, and so I would go through every one of my accounts. It sounds like it's a lot of work, but it's really not so bad because now I have this thing set up, and I just come over here, drill down. I've got it set up here, and there it is, ready to go again. Just go through, sort of scan down it. Okay. You could get it more sophisticated by filtering and looking in only debits and hoping to see all the ends there. And you could really get more sophisticated by having debits and filter by debits and in, and hope you don't get anything. If you got something, you got something that needs to be looked at. And so that could be a little bit, something you could work on your spare time. All right. We also have the exact same problems with our transfers. Okay. So we could drill down on all of our transfers. Okay. By this is actually a whole new step we've gone to, checking the flag on my transfers. We got transfer date, journal number, line number, transaction reference description, and then I'm going to put debit and credit marker here so we can see whether it's a debit or credit, and then I'm going to put flag, and I think we could just do with the flag code. Okay, and so here we have debits out, credit in, debits out, credit in. You know, we could take them and filter them or sort them if we wanted to, and it looks like everything is working just right. So there's not a lot for us to do there, but if they saw where we have a debit that's an N, marked as an N, then we would hunt for what in the world has caused that. Okay, so we've checked the our step 11 was to review the flag for in and outs and review the flag for transfers. Okay, and then also on transfers, while we are at transfers, we want to review. Okay, so we want to review the TFWW. Okay, so we specify. Okay, and we're going to look at it by transaction. So we journal number, line number, transaction reference description. All right, and then we put in. We don't want to get confused, so let's put in function first. Okay, this is the one side of it, and then we put in the L2 TFWW. All right, and so this is the function that is this is a debit here. So this is the function that is losing resources. Okay, it's a debit. And this is the function that's getting it. Okay, and so you could study it out. First off, that would alarm you if something doesn't have a TFWW, somehow or another slip past the business rules. And then you can also take these and sort them and make sure that all of the functions are of the same type or having everything's reasonable. I know at Mission College we only did transfers based on a vote of a committee. So every time we did a transfer, the vote of the committee would be written in the description. So it would also, the vote of the committee would give us something about whether the TFWW, who is the beneficiary of this reduction of this function, or who is the payee of the increase of the function. That's what the TFWW is trying to tell us. Spend a second to see if everything's got a code and if the code makes sense based on what has been voted. Okay, so that's step 13. Step 14 is review the who. Okay, so we know in our expense accounts, account code and description, okay, that the salary accounts all need a who. So you just could simply select all of the salary accounts, all the 81s. Okay, and let's see if I can do this here for us. So let's just call that all of them. Might not be all of them, but let's drill down on that. Okay, specify, we drill down on that by who. And we don't need to be overly concerned, but the first thing that I would look for if I saw this is the who that makes up that account. Is the first thing I'd be alarmed by is if there were a number up here that was blank, that somehow or another it slipped past the business rule that an expense has gotten in there without a who. If there was one, it needs a who. You drill down on that blank one. So just pretend there's nothing here. You drill down on that one by transaction information, journal number and so forth, and get it a who. I also, sometimes it's legitimate for there to be a asterisk up here. So in function, I said there should never be an asterisk function, but it is possible that we have an employee expense account that cannot be tagged with who. I would take those and I would drill down on those and make sure that they were legitimate. A legitimate use of an asterisk is where you have an employee expense that cannot be tagged to a specific employee. I know at my institution we had a pension payment that we had to pay to the union that was charged based on total payroll, but was not really a cost of the employee. We would have to pay this no matter what, so that it wasn't caused by the employee, and so that would be a legitimate asterisk. But most of the time you see the use of asterisks, the accountants have not gone to the trouble of tracking down the who. I will mention, as this a matter of common advice, is that accountants are very inclined to not put in a new who when they think it's a temporary or part-time worker. This is a serious mistake. On your routine workers that you really can't get rid of, that's not a good way to say it, our permanent long-term employees, their total cost is not that interesting. But managing our part-time people cost and managing our temporary people cost is very important. So it's more important to capture the who on part-time workers and temporary workers, because you might have 3 part-time workers and you say, what would happen if we combine them into one new line? You want to know those costs. And so I really encourage you to look at that asterisk and make sure that they're setting up an ER account, who account for every worker, even if it's a part-time, even if you know they're going to leave. You think they're going to leave, but they end up not leaving. So just religiously set them up. But there are occasions when the asterisk has to be used, like I said. So I check them. And then you'd also scan down here. It'd be very common to see a non-current employee coming up with an expense because of a coding error. So you can look down at these making sense. You see one employee has got 3 times as much as everybody else. It's probably a coding error. Then you can drill down on that and see what transaction has been coded to the wrong employee. And so that is reviewing the who. We do the same thing with org ID. Okay, we have org ID is important and required on various accounts. The ones that come to mind first to me. Okay, let me get rid of my dependent sheets again so I don't get confused here. Okay, what comes to mind to me is these payable accounts over in the liability. So we drill down by account code and description, and every transaction in these payable accounts need to have an org ID. So you could perhaps combine this with what I showed you earlier. Okay, and so what organization did I get these things from? We could try doing them all together. Okay, we just get them all. Okay, and we drill down by org ID. Let's see what we get here. Okay, so here's a perfect example of what I was explaining earlier. These all are coded and reasonable. Okay, look reasonable. But here I have an item that has not gotten its org ID. Okay, let's see if we... So here we had these donations coming in here that did not have an org ID. Now it may be you decide, hey, these don't need an org ID. These are not coming, these are trust funds that did not come from another organization and they don't need it. But at least you had a chance to make sure that it's right. So if you have a thank offering coming in here and it's blank over here, you say, wait a minute, we're supposed to keep track of what organizations sent that to us. Okay, and so that is the review of org ID. Also, I will mention one other place I check org ID is on my Tithe funds, and so let's drill down on that. Tithe accounts. Okay, so I've got org ID from subsidiary organization, so I could drill down on that by org ID. It's here somewhere. Okay, and You can see that that looks fairly reasonable and tidy. There's no blanks coming here. There's no huge numbers here, and so forth. And so that's another check on the org ID that needs to be done. So for your trust funds and the tithe, it needs to have an org ID. And then the last one is a tithe completeness. Okay. I like this little thing that I do. Okay, let me remove my dependent sheets for this one. Yes. Okay, and I go down here and drill down my revenue by account code and description. Okay, and then I have my tithe account right here. All right, and so on this one, I'm going to drill down by accounting period. Okay, and these are my accounting periods, and then watch this here. So I'll highlight all of that, and we'll drill down again by org ID. Okay, you'll see what I'm going to do in a minute here. So we go. All right, and it's not so obvious here, but I would come down here. The schedule is so nice and tidy, and what we're doing is so nice and tidy. But you know from your organization that you could easily be having a white spot right there where you haven't gotten the tithe report from North Atlantic Union Conference, and then you could have these two missing. And so it would be necessary for you to decide, do I need to accrue this? Do I need to wait on the financial statements, or should I accrue what's supposed to be coming from them based on a good faith estimate? What should I do? And so but it would be a shame to issue the financial statements with not with tithe and offerings reports missing, and no provision to show to users that that they're missing, because your last year figures, your comparable last year figure, will have them all in, assuming, of course, that they've gotten in last year's tithe reports. You know, sooner or later they got them all in, and so it may look like you've had a big drop because you're just missing the reports. And so at least let me give the advice that you need to know what's going on. What you do about it maybe depend a little bit on the guidance of people that are in the know of what they want you to do and what's the standard, but at least you ought to know that you're missing tithe reports and whether you've got them. And so that would be step number 16. And then final is not very romantic, but it is something very useful, is I'm going to drill down on this by account code and description. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to drill down on my expenses that are routine expenses. They may be not the same every month, but they have a monthly transaction. Okay, so I could drill down on this by accounting period. Okay, and I'm doing my sample financial statements here is through the end of December of 2009, and I could see that I have all of my salaries in. Okay, this is sort of boring, but you could see, do I have, go through the ones that have routine things, you know they're going to be there and need to be gotten in, especially if you find that there's often things missing. All right, so here's depreciation. Okay, here are all my depreciation. I drill down on that by accounting period. Okay, and I could see that my depreciation entry has been made for that time. Okay, and I could come down here to my electricity expense. Okay, insurance expense, have an insurance amortization, insurance accrual entry being made there. You know, you might get billed once a year, but you need to be making accrual entry each month. You could check to see whether that is being made, that entry by accounting period, and you could see that it is being made. And another good one to do this on is electricity expense, I believe. Okay, if I could find it. Okay, I know you that are watching have, here we go. See it right in front of you, and so account period, and is the electricity expense. So if you had 3 of these empty, and it could be the accountant said, well, look, we've recorded everything we've received, But that's not an excuse for issuing financial statements with 3 blank figures there. Those numbers need to be accrued if you haven't gotten them. You shouldn't be making financial statements where you know you're missing some information. And your actual action depends a little bit on your professional judgment, your professional situation. But my point is that you ought to know that you're issuing financial statements with 3 months electricity bill missing. The company hasn't gotten around to issuing. Okay, so those are the 17 steps that I have pointed out so far. Let me remind you that what we're trying to do is I've made 17 that I think are useful, and then hopefully as people watch this video, they will start sending me things that they do or improvements, and we'll add them to the sheet. So you want to make sure that you get that document that I showed you at the beginning that lists out the 17 steps, and try to follow those as you prepare your financial statements. And I'm hoping praying that God will continue to bless you in your ministry as a financial executive for His church.